Hey, and we're live. What's up, Faithful? Welcome to the Stay Faithful podcast. I am Ty Alston, and today joining me is Marc Adams of
What's up,
49ers Web
faithful?
Zone and 49ers Camelot. Sorry to cut you off. I was
That's
trying
all
to give
right.
you a proper intro.
No, that's all right. I was just thinking, man, I like the name of your show,
Stay
and
Faithful.
yeah,
That's what
and
it's
so I
all
thought
about.
that was pretty appropriate.
Yeah. This is a rebranding. It was the Faithful 101 because I'm going, one on one with people, but the mantra has always been to stay faithful. It's what I started to say at the end of every episode, and try to
Yeah,
tell people to stay positive about the team, about blocking out the excess noise, and just stay faithful. So
yeah,
here we are, stay faithful.
that's great.
Yeah. So Marc, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure. We spoke previously on the East Coast Red and Gold podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but that was about 2 weeks ago. I wanted to get you here one on one because so much has happened since then.
Yeah,
Just kind of pick your
little,
brain and
just a
talk
little
about
bit.
things just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But first and foremost, I'm a displaced fan. I was born and raised here in New York City. And being a displaced fan, I like to hear the stories of how others that aren't from the West Coast became a fan. And I know you are originally from Houston,
Mm-hmm.
and we're about the same age. So you grew up with the Oilers,
Yeah.
and you have the Cowboys to the north of you, and then to the east you had the Saints. So with all that going
Yeah.
on around you, how'd you skip over that and become a 49ers fan?
Well, the same. This would have been, in those Earl Campbell days, the Love You Blue, Bum Phillips
Oh
days,
yeah.
when the Oilers were battling it out in the AFC Championship against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but kept losing. One of those
Right.
times they really got ripped off. It was before replay, and so they should have won one of those games and got to go play for the Super Bowl. But that's old history. So yeah, the Saints were terrible. This was back when they were called the Aints,
The Aints.
and the fans were wearing bags.
Four bags over there.
Yeah, and of course, the Cowboys, I mean, in the 70s, they were a really hot team, but as the 80s rolled around, they kind of started to stink. Really what happened was when Montana hit Clark in that NFC Championship game, it shot the 49ers up and it
Yeah.
knocked the Cowboys down. And the Cowboys were bad. They were terrible, really, for an entire decade and or more. And the 49ers, of course, dominated. So here's the situation. This is such a funny story. I'm just a little kid, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the Oilers traded Earl Campbell to the New Orleans Aints.
Aints. Yeah.
And I thought, that's just cruel to do that. My family moved away from Houston. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pick a new team. I don't like the Oilers anymore because they've traded away my favorite player. And so whoever wins this next Super Bowl is my new team. So thankfully, the 49ers beat the Bengals. And when I talked to George Seifert for this Roger Craig story that I wrote a couple of years ago, I thanked him for winning that Super Bowl so that I didn't have to grow up a Bengals fan. And he thought that was pretty funny. But and then the 49ers beat the Bengals later in that decade again.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's why
Super Bowl
Chris
23.
Collinsworth hates the 49ers. He hates
Yep.
Joe Montana, even though he says that Joe Montana's Jesus in cleats or whatever he
Yeah.
called him. He still hates the 49ers. And I have Bengals fans who are friends of mine, and they hate the 49ers.
Yeah.
And when Roger Craig fumbled in that NFC Championship game in 1990 and the 49ers lost that game, I had numerous Bengals fans that I went to college with at the time that really were letting me have it. And I had friends who just kind of were like, whoa, y'all barking up the wrong tree, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a violent person, so I'm not going to hurt anybody, but still I must have given them a look that could kill. So
Right. Oh, that's interesting. So who we all kind of have that story, because I have Bengals friends as well that, oh, they couldn't wait to say, ha,
Yeah.
you didn't do it. And it was
Yeah.
like, well, we still beat you twice and we just repeated. This is in
Right.
1990, of course.
Mhm.
It's like, and we just repeated. So
Yep.
you need to pump your brakes a bit with the trash talk. You can't really do it.
Should have repeated, but
Yeah,
that's a whole nother story.
right. It's a totally different story.
Yeah.
I gotta take a quick second to shout out Bryant Culp, who's in here. Thank you,
What's up,
Bryant, for being here. Love the Joker shirt. It's actually a George Kittle shirt. I don't know if you can see there's an 8 and a 5 for the eyes.
Yeah,
and,
that is cool.
oh, hey there, creepy written. So yeah, but thank you, Bryant. David Brown Ironers in the house. Hey, David. And Tony Cole. Love you, Tony. One of our ladies of the empire. She's awesome.
Yeah. What's up, Tony and David?
Yep.
Bryant. I talked to Bryant yesterday.
Yeah. He's a good dude. One of the true faithful and just a good person. Love that I met him and become friends with him.
Yeah.
It shows, how, we 49er fans, say it all the time. We're not just a fan base. We're a true community.
Yeah.
We really can come together from all sections of the world, really, and unite and be friends.
Yeah, and it's huge too. So It's like that's one of the reasons why I took so long to decide to start doing a podcast. Even though I started writing for 49ers Web Zone, and then, gosh, I don't know, probably a year into that, started having people say, man, you need to do your own podcast.
Right.
And I just was like, that sounds like way too much work. Far too lazy. And so, because writing is hard enough,
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons that I waited so long was the fact that there's so many content creators for the 49ers and so many really good ones. And so I didn't really want to I didn't want to be like everybody else. So if I was going to do it, I was going to do things a little bit different. And so that's why, even though here lately I've been doing way too much solo stuff,
right,
what I prefer to do is get really good guests, because nobody's interested in hearing from me. At least that's my opinion. But if I get really good guests, then people will come watch them or listen to them. And so what I just try to do is like interview style, as if they're on the radio, and try to make them the star of the show. And so that's a little different than what most out there are doing. And so that's kind of, that's once I fell into, okay, maybe if I do this, maybe it'll be different enough that that I won't be doing just like what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I fall in that same category. Try to just go one-on-one with people. I even just don't even do it live sometimes, just so we can block out the outside noise and just have a general conversation.
Yeah,
I think it adds some variety to everything else that's out there.
Right. Yep.
So it's definitely a good way to go. I'm there with you, buddy.
Yeah, I've been on some shows where they had, 5 or 6 of us as guests, and it just gets chaotic. And I don't know, I'm not putting down what anybody does, because I respect them and I appreciate the invite and I enjoy going on them, but just sometimes it's hard, and those seem to last a lot longer, like an hour, hour and a half. Yes. And so I try to keep mine around 30 minutes so that I'm not taking too much time from people. And so it's worked so far. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Same here. Real quick. So tell me, who are some of your favorite players growing up when you were following the team?
Well, after Earl Campbell, it immediately became Joe
traded.
Montana. Yeah. Montana was my favorite. Right after I became a 49ers fan, I would say this had to have been 1983. The Redskins knocked the 49ers out of the playoffs in the NFC Championship game. Thanks to some bogus calls at the end of the game when they called Ronnie Lott for holding and called somebody else for pass interference. 2 terrible calls. The Redskins go on to win. And so that Super Bowl, it was the Raiders and the Redskins. And I was like, man, my favorite team's the 49ers, but I'm rooting hard for the Raiders. And then Marcus Allen goes off.
Yep.
181 yards rushing or something like
Yep.
that. So he immediately became my second favorite player.
Okay.
And it stayed that way until I'd say late 80s when this Rice kid started to come into his own.
I heard him. I heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. So Montana and Rice, Marcus Allen. And then obviously in the 90s, man, when Steve Young takes over.
Yeah.
I love Joe Montana. He's still my favorite player of all time. But I probably rooted harder for Steve Young. I think that Steve Young is, I don't want to say, this is going to sound terrible, but I like him more as a person. He's just a genuinely good guy. Not that Joe Montana's not, but Montana was gracious and let me interview him for that Roger Craig story.
Yes.
And so, like, I am very gracious of that, and it was incredible, to be able to talk to him. But and part of it probably is that fans hated Steve Young. And it was so weird because, like, all he's doing is winning passing titles.
Yeah.
And people just were like, he's the devil. He's not Joe.
He wasn't Joe. That was it.
Not Joe. Nobody's Joe, I mean, I know that Tom Brady's won like 50 Super Bowls by this point, but I still don't even think that Tom Brady's Joe.
No.
And so I don't think that the fan base was fair to Steve, and just the way that he got worked. I mean, he tells that story in his book about when Walsh brought him in 1987 and told Steve that, hey, Joe's got a messed up elbow. He may never play again. And they show up for the first day of practice and out trots Montana. And Steve looks at Walsh and Walsh goes,
right.
So, it's like, I just think that he just didn't get a fair shake at times, but I love both of those guys. So if I had to pick one, for a season, well, I'm always going to go with Joe. I mean, but Steve in 94 he was better in 94 than Joe ever was in the other season. Joe in 1989 was incredible.
Yeah.
But I think that Steve Young just in 94, he was just so amazing. But so those were two of my favorites. Those two, and Rice and Marcus Allen, Earl Campbell. Those are my guys growing up as a kid. So when I played backyard football, I was going to be one of those guys, So I was usually a running back or a wide receiver, and and of course I loved Ronnie Lott. And in the late 80s, they had another safety named Jeff Fuller who hit just as hard as Ronnie Lott did. And in 89, January of 89, when they played in Super Bowl 23, both those guys wore black cleats, which was against NFL rules. And so they took the fine, but they wore the black cleats. And I just remember thinking that was pretty cool. And so I went out and bought some black cleats. Not that I could hit like them, of course, but I just thought that was pretty cool.
I love Jeff Fuller. I'm glad you mentioned his name. A lot of people don't know about him, or they've forgotten about him, but he was a guy that if he didn't get injured and his career wasn't cut short, we would be speaking about him the way we speak of Ronnie Lott. I really feel that way. He was just incredible.
He was paralyzed or something, wasn't he? It was a big hit in 90 or 91 or something like that.
Yeah, versus the Patriots, I believe. And he was paralyzed. And he regained some mobility, but I believe he lost the use of his right arm.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a beast. And that Super Bowl 23 had Lott, Fuller, and then on the other side, David Fulcher, who was
Yeah.
just killing people in that Super Bowl. And so I was like, man, this is the Super Bowl for the safeties right here.
Yep.
And those guys, all three of them, Ronnie Lott hit Ickey Woods so hard. And Ickey Woods was a big running back, real stocky. And Ronnie Lott stopped him like he had run into a wall. And that play is famous. I mean, that but some of those hits that Fulcher laid on some of the 49ers in that game were pretty legendary too.
He was trying to take people out for sure. It was definitely a hard-hitting affair. Let you know why the score was so low.
Yep.
There's no easy yards going over the middle that day.
Yeah. And to think how close those teams actually were. If you remember, early in the game, the Bengals had their star nose tackle was a guy named Tim Crumry, and he broke his leg. Went out of the game. And, I've wondered over the years how big of a difference that made, because they would have had trouble running the ball.
Oh yeah,
if he was still in the game, because he was a stud, and they moved the ball well at times, but then would have a turnover or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't an easy day running the ball without him. It wasn't like they were running up and down the field. It was tough yardage.
Yeah.
So losing him was definitely an advantage for the 49ers.
Right.
It's always going to be one of those what ifs he had played. What if,
Yep.
But that hit Ronnie Lott on Ickey Woods. There's no what ifs about that. There was no Ickey shuffle after that.
Yep.
At all.
Man. I felt that one a long ways away.
Yeah. Ronnie Lott always talks about one of those woo hits, where the whole crowd goes woo. I know I was at home and I said woo. Woo.
Yep.
Yeah. Fierce. So I want to play a game of some 49ers Twilight Zone with you. So imagine, if you will, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice, and Ronnie Lott had never played for the 49ers. Who would you put then on a 49ers Mount Rushmore?
Wow. Boy, that is a tough one, because, usually people do a lot of these 49ers Mount Rushmore things, and those are the four that are always up there.
Right.
Boy, gosh, if there's Roger Craig probably has to be on there. Yep. Frank Gore probably has to be on there. Terrell Owens. I want to put Dwight Clark on there because of that. He had a lot more catches than just that one catch that everybody knows about. But that's probably too easy. Patrick Willis probably should be on there. Bryant Young should be there.
See, it gets hard when you eliminate those four and say, what if? Now,
I know.
Give me four. It's so many players, such an abundance.
Talent, I think, Charles Haley would be another one.
Yes.
It ended bad, but, but he had, the things that he was dealing with that maybe he couldn't help that. And I might go Deion Sanders, even though it was only one season. The impact, I don't think they win the Super Bowl. I don't think they get past the Cowboys without Deion. And so that one season that he played was worth a Super Bowl. And so I don't know. Because you can look at each Super Bowl and, does Steve Young get the Super Bowl that he gets without Deion Sanders? I don't know. Maybe he does. But John Taylor would be another one. If there's no Jerry Rice, John Taylor might be in the Hall of Fame, because he was, the 49ers fed Rice, they fed Craig, they still had Brent Jones. But man, before, with all of that going on, you still had Taylor, who probably was better after the catch than even Rice was.
Yeah.
And John Taylor was incredible. He was a brilliant punt returner.
There
There
you
was
go.
that game against the Rams where he took two of them, two short passes from
Yep.
Montana near the goal line,
Yep.
and both of them over 90-yard
90 yards.
touchdowns
Yep.
I think that was like on Monday night or
That was a
something like
Monday
that.
night versus the Rams. Yes.
Yeah, so
You remember.
I can still see him running. Like his running style was a little
Yes.
different, but man, he was so good. But there's so many great ones throughout the years.
Exactly. It's a difficult question. That's why I like to ask it, because then you start to really think about all of the great players that play for the organization.
Yeah.
And it makes you remember, these guys aren't forgotten. I still remember them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a good one.
Yeah.
I love John Taylor. He's not spoken about enough, in my opinion.
Right.
I remember listening to a Deion Sanders interview, and Deion said John Taylor on any other team would be the number one receiver.
Mm-hmm.
He was that good.
Yeah.
Like, I guarded Rice and I guarded him, and I'm telling you, he was that good.
Yeah.
So much props to John Taylor for sure. And didn't he make the Pro Bowl as a kick returner or something?
I'm not sure.
Maybe not. I know he did well though.
He was a very good punt returner. I mean, they had Dana McLemore had done well as a punt returner. Don Griffin had done well, but none of them were as good as John Taylor.
Right.
And then they moved on from Taylor in the late 80s and started using Dexter Carter as punt returner. And Carter was good, but he sometimes would fumble the ball, so I always was nervous. But when I interviewed Montana for the Craig story, he talked about, because one of the arguments against Roger Craig being in the Hall of Fame is that he played with Montana, he played with Rice, Bill Walsh was his coach, and so the argument that we were making was, look, that actually works against him because he wasn't fed often enough.
Yes,
and so. Montana was talking about that, and he actually mentioned John Taylor. He said, because first he said if Roger Craig was playing for a different team, then his stats would be a lot more eye-popping. And then he goes, you know what? Same thing for John Taylor. If John Taylor wasn't playing on the other side of Jerry Rice, his numbers would have been eye-popping as well. And so, and then I think he may have even thrown Brent Jones in there as well. And so it's true, there's only one football and you can't give it to everybody. And when you have a statistics hog like Rice, because he was just so stinking good, you have to get him the ball.
Yeah. Yes. Everyone was playing, second and third fiddle behind him. And it's like, well, he's open.
Right.
He's going to be the first option because he's always open.
Yeah.
So there you go. So let me ask you this, because we got a lot of people out there that want to cover the team. They want to get into that. And you obviously were a fan and then started covering the team as a journalist. Was it hard for you to make that switch, to go from root for my team fan to being an unbiased journalist?
I'm not unbiased. I mean, I am, but I am honest.
You're honest. So there's some honesty to it. Yes.
Yeah, so when they've had moments where, like last year in the Denver game, which was horrible, Garoppolo runs out of the back of the end zone like he's a rookie playing in his first game. And the year before in 2021, when they were just playing terrible and it looked like they were going to have a losing season, I was not I wasn't soft with them. I wrote straightforward and told the truth. And I remember I tweeted a few things. Like there was something that I found in some research that I was doing, that since Eddie DeBartolo had to give up the team and his sister took over, I don't remember what the statistic was, but it was startling how bad the 49ers had been. And I put that on Twitter, and it really blew up, and a lot of people took it and ran with it. And so my mom I just happened to be at my parents. They live in Louisiana, and I just happened to be there. And I was telling her, man, this thing really blew up. And she goes, you mean you write negative stuff about your team? And I said, I have to. I have to tell the truth. I can't just be like all roses and sunshine. If they're the best in the league, I'm going to say they're the best in the league. If they're the worst in the league, I'm going to say the same thing. So now it hasn't been that hard because I just, as a fan, I'm up and down with them. And so the way that I'm going to write is the same way that I'm going to react, and so I do have to taper that a little bit. Like, I don't want to get on Twitter and say, oh my gosh, they look terrible, this is the worst team in the league, when maybe they just had one bad drive, because as fans, sometimes we overreact. And so I have to check myself with that. But other than that, it's pretty cool to be able to just talk and, or write and just be honest with it.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it. Just be honest, just be straightforward. Like you said, be a straight shooter and call it like you see it.
Yeah.
And you'll be okay.
Yeah, there are some that are just always going to take the positive road. Mm-hmm. And there are some that I'm not going to name any names, but some who always, I think the 49ers could win the Super Bowl and they're still going to criticize them. And I don't understand that. I don't understand either side. I'd rather just, sometimes I'll listen to one particular person, a beat writer who's really negative. Sometimes I'll listen to him, because occasionally I think he's funny. But the other reason is if he's saying really good things about the team, then I know that they're looking really good. So
right.
So it's more entertainment. It's not if I'm needing news, I'm going Mayoko and Barrows. If I'm needing like film breakdown, I'm going John Chapman. Somebody like that that's really good at that. So yeah.
Yeah. I got to take a minute to give a shout out to some people in the chat. We got Paul, my buddy Paul Hope, all the way from
Paul?
the UK, 49er Faithful UK representing. What's up, Paul?
Paul's great.
My guy Dion, Niner Gang Podcast. Good to see you, Dion.
What's up, Dion?
Mariah, 49 Faithful Lee in the house.
Mariah,
hey, Mariah.
What's up?
I'm tuning in right after we're done. Don't worry. I will be there with you and Steph. That's a great show. Everybody, make sure you check out their show. The GOAT Show, they call it. I love that name. Support our female 49ers content creators and fans, period, because they are the best. And Jason, Niner Smash Massey in the house.
What's up, Jason?
49ers Ultimate Report. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, everybody. What's going on, man?
Yeah. So you mentioned Roger Craig, and you did the wonderful series. It was a 4-part or 5-part series?
4.
4 parts.
Yeah, series. For some reason, when you go to my YouTube channel and go to that series, it says that there's 5 videos. Yeah, I'm not sure why it says that because there's only 4.
I know we spoke about this before, and you told me it was 4, but when I went to your channel, so it's 5, and I thought, okay, maybe he did an extra episode. I don't know. So that's why I had to ask.
Yeah, it must have been like a mistake in uploading it or something. Right. I don't really know, but yeah, there's only 4.
Right. Okay. And it was a great series talking about Roger Craig, and you got so many people to contribute. I mean, it was amazing. But we heard the news that he once again didn't get into the Hall.
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction to hearing that news? Like, how'd you take it?
I was pretty disappointed. I knew before because I knew that it was going to drop possibly that Tuesday, but more likely Wednesday. And so Wednesday I'd waited like all morning and hadn't heard anything. So I texted Matt Mayoko because he's a Hall of Fame voter. And so I knew that he would know as soon as it happened. And I said, hey, when's the news about Roger going to drop? And he said, he texted me back in 10 minutes, it's not good news. Oh. And I just was like, oh man, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach because I really thought this was going to be the year.
Yeah.
But then Matt texted me and he said, because I said, oh man, that's really disappointing. And he said, it is, but I'm told that it was very close, very positive. And he said, I've never said this before, but I think next year is his year. So then after that, I talked to, there's a lady who works at Eddie DeBartolo's office. And she and I have worked pretty closely on this ever since I wrote that first story. And she's real knowledgeable about the Hall of Fame, how that goes. Her husband is actually a beat writer for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So she really understands the inner workings of this stuff. And so she was super helpful to me. So we got on the phone right after the news broke. And she said, I spoke to 2 of the Hall of Fame voters who were in the room. And they said, so what happens is every candidate, and so in this case, there's 12 candidates in the final 12, and each one has a Hall of Fame voter that gets up and basically makes the case why that player deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. At that point, there can be others get up and speak or ask questions, and then they move on to the next one, and then they vote at the end. And so the way that we were told this goes is if the discussion after the appeal is made, if the discussion that follows is dead, that player is dead, meaning he's not going to get in if there's no discussion. And so from what she had 2 Hall of Fame voters who were in the room say no one was discussed more and longer than Roger Craig, and the discussion was very positive. So Roger made it into the final 6. They selected 3, and so that makes it look like, and these voters even said next year could be his year, but obviously a lot can change. I think, and I said this last night on my podcast, that it's very possible that Steve McMichael was selected because he's dying of ALS, and he's probably not going to live. I don't know if you've seen videos or pictures of him, but he looked like, I don't know what he weighs. If he weighs 100 pounds, I don't know.
I know he's a stick figure.
Yeah, he looks bad, and so he's probably not going to make it till next year. But he did at least get the joy of finding out that he was selected.
Yeah.
So when I interviewed a couple of Hall of Fame voters for this podcast, they both stressed that, look, when a player leaves the regular pool and goes into the senior pool, their chances go way down. And so these guys really struggle with that because they don't like Kenny Stabler went in a few years back, but he's already passed away. And so one of the voters mentioned that to me and said, we don't want that stuff. We want to see players get selected before they pass away so they can enjoy the experience. So I really think, I'm not saying Steve McMichael doesn't deserve it, but I think that one of the reasons why he got in might have been because of his health situation. Now, I was also told that the Hall of Fame voter that built McMichael's case or presented Michael's case did an amazing job. So, and the guy had almost 100 sacks in his career. So
he was no slouch.
He was on the greatest defense of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like he doesn't deserve it. I personally feel like Roger Craig deserved it more. And there were a lot of guys and girls late in the game, like after the podcast series came out, people like Matt Mayoko, Ronnie Lott, even Joe Montana. Joe Montana was in Ireland, and he was even making calls to Hall of Fame voters just to try to, hey, I think Roger needs to be in there because, if I get up and say Roger needs to be in, big deal. I'm a nobody.
Yes.
But if Joe Montana calls you and says, I think Roger should be in, then he should be in. But they not only were doing this to Hall of Fame voters, they were like Ronnie Lott was reaching out to former players and getting statements from them. So they got like Mike Singletary and several others. And so one of the things that I was told by Valerie, the lady at DeBartolo's office, is that they tried to get a statement from Dan Hampton, which would have been a great statement.
Yeah.
He didn't get back to him. And we kind of understand that because Dan Hampton doesn't want to make a case for Roger Craig because he wanted his buddy Steve McMichael to get in.
Yeah.
So the hope is next year maybe Dan Hampton will get in. And they also, like, we're already making plans for what we're going to do next year. The 49ers, Keena Turner works for the 49ers, and he's already given us a commitment that the 49ers will get involved in this next year. And they're even going to go as far as to get Bill Belichick to get involved and make a statement. We did reach out to Bill Parcells.
I was about to ask about him, the other Bill.
He refused to do it. He said that he didn't think that Roger Craig was that good. And so I was like, well, Bill Parcells is old and senile, so what does he know?
But Craig gave his team fits.
Right. Yeah, well, here's the thing. He said Roger Craig, in his opinion, was a one-dimensional back who couldn't block. But now Roger Craig started his career as a fullback.
As a fullback, exactly.
And fullbacks usually block. But that's not how Walsh used him. I mean, he did block. Yeah. But to call Roger Craig one-dimensional is, I don't think that Bill Parcells is that dumb. I think that maybe he's just bitter.
Yes.
I don't know that he liked Walsh that much. I think that I've heard things like that before. I don't know if it's true, but there definitely was a lot of competitive juice between Walsh and Parcells. Yeah. So sometimes I wonder, if you're talking Montana, Young, Rice, you can't argue those guys, but Roger, if he's on the fence, maybe you say, nah, he's not worthy, but that's crap. I mean, he's definitely worthy.
100%. Yeah. You mentioned, you have plans to, once again, appeal for Roger and the 49ers are getting involved. I wanted to ask, is there anything for fans? Is there anything a fan can do to say, hey, I watched this guy. Here's why I think he should be in the Hall. Is there anything we can do?
I don't think so, because of the fact that the Hall of Fame voters had guys like Joe Montana and Ronnie Lott call them. And they got statements from Steve Young and Mike Singletary and guys like that. And I sent the podcast series to all of the voters, and I had two of them write me back and say, this is great, but we expect his teammates to,
you mentioned that.
to really endorse him. So how about some opposing players? Well, we did that as well. And so it still fell short, but I think that I really think that next year is going to be the year. And so the thing that I believe is going to happen, and Valerie is probably going to be the one spearheading this. Someone told her that when Dan Hampton was a candidate, that a writer, maybe at the Chicago Tribune, but somebody who covered the Bears, put together this thing where it was all analytics driven, where he was able to show when Dan Hampton was on the field, this is how the Bears defense looked.
Okay.
And when he wasn't on the field, this is how the Bears defense looked. And she said that she was told that the Hall of Fame voters were blown away by this. So that's actually something that I think the 49ers are going to try and help with, because our first, she told me about that. My first thought is, how the heck am I going to find out when, in the 80s, when he's on the field and when he's not on the field, because you can look at the play-by-play from each game.
Yes.
And you can see when he touched the ball, but you can't tell when he's on the field, when he
Physically
was
on the field,
a
right.
decoy or when he was blocking
Exactly.
or something like that.
Exactly.
And so, but the 49ers do have access to that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I think that if they follow what they have said and they get on board with that, that's going to carry a huge amount of weight.
Yeah. Hopefully it does. Fingers crossed, we're all rooting for Roger. I've had several conversations. I've had conversations with Cowboys fans. Like, for some reason, we 49ers fans, we're associated with a lot of Cowboys fans. Why, I don't know. But I've had conversations with Cowboys fans, and they're like, why isn't Roger Craig in the Hall of Fame? I'm like, we asked that question as well.
You know what I've had? I had when this, not only from this series, but from the story before, I've had so many people, 49ers fans and non-49ers fans, write me and say, wait, he's not already in? Like, they're shocked.
Yes.
That's how much he belongs in, that everybody thinks that he's already in. And so, and then when I say, no, he's not, it's weird. Why is he not in? Good question. That's what we'd like to know.
Yep, I've gotten that reaction as well. And it's like, it's one of the biggest questions we have.
Yeah.
So, fingers crossed, next year is the year, because we would all love to see him in there, and that would be a huge celebration on his behalf. Yeah. But Marc, that's our time. I want to thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
It's been absolutely great just chatting with you, buddy.
Yeah.
This was great.
I appreciate the time. So tell me before I go, who's going to win on September 10th in Pittsburgh? Is it going to be the Niners or the Steelers?
It's going to be the Niners.
All right.
It's going to be the Niners. Everybody's like a little shaky, and Pittsburgh doesn't do that. Yeah, we're going to break that streak. Don't worry.
Well, I tell you what,
come out and do their thing.
Last month I interviewed Brian Peacock, and another day interviewed Katie Mox of CBS Sports HQ.
Yeah.
She's dynamic, by the way.
She's great.
She's really good. That girl knows her stuff.
Smart as a whip.
Yeah, and Brian, he's no slouch. And so I asked both of them, who's going to win the game in Pittsburgh? And so with the I took this little clip from when I asked Brian Peacock, and I put it on YouTube. And I have had so many, like too many to count, Steelers fans not coming, not jumping into the comments and saying, yeah, we're going to win, but coming in and saying it's not going to be close. We're going to beat the 49ers so bad that we're going to hurt Brock Purdy, and not hoping that he's hurt, but just we're going to knock him around,
beat him up.
And we're going to be more physical than the 49ers and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, they're not just coming in and saying we think our team's going to win. They're coming in and saying it's not even going to be close.
Right.
And I'm like, good grief. I'm arguing with some of them at first, but then there were so many that I was like, yeah, forget it. I'm just going to ignore them, because they were coming. I don't know where they came from, but it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's kind of annoying.
Yeah. They found you, buddy. I mean, everybody's just got cabin fever waiting for week 1. So they're ready to talk trash and get going.
Yep, I know.
Yeah. That's the excitement of football season.
Yep.
So we'll be here. But once again, thank you so much. I appreciate
my pleasure.
This, and we'll chat again soon. This is great.
It was fun.
Yeah. And everybody, thanks for joining in. This is the Stay Faithful podcast. I'm Ty. Stay faithful, everybody. See ya.
See ya. Go Niners.